We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. We exist where power assumes silence will protect it, where lies are repeated until people are too tired to argue back, and where corruption hides behind procedure and patriotism. Today we're pulling the curtain on a moment Donald Trump never planned for. His own party, his own MAGA machine, starting to splinter in public, right there in Congress, right where he needs obedience the most. It starts with the numbers, because numbers don't care about Trump's tantrums. On this vote, the yeas are 230, the nays are 196. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. That's not a vibe. That's not spin. That's a recorded reality. And in that reality, Republicans revolted against a truly revolting individual, Donald Trump. What you saw on the House floor was MAGA Republicans joining forces with Democrats to extend Affordable Care Act subsidies. 17 Republicans broke ranks and voted with Democrats to extend those subsidies. 17. That's not a rounding error. That's a warning light blinking inside Trump's own party. And this wasn't some polite little compromise arranged by leadership. It was defiance. It was members going around the top because the top, Speaker Mike Johnson and Trump's orbit, didn't want this vote to happen. The bill got forced to the floor through a discharge petition, meaning the usual command and control broke down. When a party has to use procedural crowbars to do basic governing because the leader is held hostage by Trump's ego, that party is not unified. It's trapped. Now it moves to the Senate, and Trump is going to do what Trump always does: threaten, bully, and sabotage. The story is clear. He's going to work to block the Affordable Care Act subsidies from being sent to his desk, because he would likely veto it anyway. That is Trump in one sentence. If something helps people, and he can't claim personal credit, he tries to kill it. If something makes his opponents look competent, he tries to burn it down. If something proves government can still function without his permission, he treats it like a personal insult. And the details matter here, because Trump's entire brand is built on pretending he alone fixes things. But these subsidies are about real people and real costs. Families who rely on those credits don't care about his slogans. They care about whether they can afford a doctor, whether they can afford medication, whether they can keep their coverage. Trump hears that and thinks, leverage, hostage, pressure point. That's how his mind works. He doesn't govern, he extorts. But yesterday wasn't just the House. In the United States Senate, by unanimous consent, lawmakers agreed to put up the January 6th plaque honoring law enforcement at the Capitol during the January 6th insurrection. And yes, this is the plaque that Congress approved, the plaque that has been delayed, disputed, and effectively buried while Trump and his allies tried to rewrite what the world watched with its own eyes. Republican Senator Tom Tillis, who is not running for re-election, worked with Democrats on a bipartisan basis. Good, because honoring the officers who defended the Capitol shouldn't be controversial unless you're protecting the people who attacked it. Democrats were pushing for the plaque. The MAGAs were blocking it. MAGA Mike Johnson in the House was blocking it. And you even had filings in court trying to argue that a law passed in 2023 to officially put up this January 6th memorial plaque was unlawful. Johnson claimed it was unlawful too. Think about how sick that is. A memorial honoring law enforcement gets treated like contraband because it collides with Trump's propaganda. Then Trump made it worse. He put lies about January 6th on the White House website. He kept pushing the same poisonous rewrite, the same attempt to bleach the violence, the same effort to erase the courage of the officers and replace it with myth. And it became too much even for Senate leadership to keep pretending. Tillis, working with Democrats, forced the issue forward. The Senate finally agreed the plaque will go up on the Senate side. Meanwhile, MAGA, Mike in the House, refused to put it up on the House side because Donald Trump does not want a plaque memorializing the police officers, the real courageous individuals, the real heroes of January 6th. Trump doesn't honor those officers because honoring them means admitting what happened. And admitting what happened means admitting he lit the fuse. And as Scott MacFarlane, one of the journalists breaking the J6 plaque story, has said, this plaque could hang in the third-floor visitor area where the rioters were on January 6th. That's the point. Put the truth where the public can't miss it. So you have the J6 plaque. You also have the War Powers Resolution. Because while Trump is busy fantasizing about power, military power, executive power, I do what I want power, Congress is starting to show teeth. A War Powers Resolution was advanced in the Senate to restrict Donald Trump's ability to take further military action in Venezuela. The vote was 52-47 to advance. A bipartisan rebuke, and the Republicans who joined Democrats were Murkowski, Young, Paul Collins, and Hawley. Tim Kaine pushed it forward, joined by other co-sponsors like Senator Schiff. You even hear the cold language of the chamber, because that's how Democratic guardrails sound when they're trying to hold back a man who treats the Constitution like a napkin. The yeas are 52, the nays are 47. The motion is agreed to. Joint resolution will be placed on the calendar. And why did this happen? Because Trump keeps trying to act like Congress is optional. Because he treats war like a stage prop. Because he believes the military exists to serve his impulses. And when senators across party lines see a president drifting toward more military action without clear authorization, some of them finally do the bare minimum. They say no. They say we are not your rubber stamp. Trump, of course, threatened to veto that too. Because Trump doesn't do oversight. Trump does intimidation. He does loyalty or punishment. He does rage. He does revenge. He does the politics of the mob boss, not the president. And then there's Greenland, because Trump's foreign policy is basically a late-night rant with nuclear codes nearby. On a bipartisan basis, Democrats and Republicans in the Senate invited the ambassador from Denmark and the ambassador from Greenland to meet with the Senate so the Senate could reassure them that the Senate on a bipartisan basis has their back. That alone tells you how serious the damage is. Senators felt the need to personally signal, we are not all like him. We are not all drunk on the same delusion. Even Trump recognizes the MAGA Republicans are losing control in the House and the Senate. On Hannity, Trump conceded that he's likely to lose the midterms, and it's likely going to get ugly for him and the MAGA Republicans. And listen to how he tries to frame it. He says the sitting president always loses the midterms. He calls it psychological. He floats the idea voters want a check. That's not analysis. That's pre-excuse. That's Trump looking at the storm clouds and trying to blame the sky. Then Senator Tillis goes on CNN and says the obvious thing that shouldn't even need saying. NATO matters. Allies matter. Article 5 matters. He talks about how the only country that benefited from Article 5 was the United States and Afghanistan, and how allies lost treasure and lives. He says we owe them respect. He says our ability to project power, to stand off against Putin, to stand off Russia, to stand off China, Iran, rests on the capability we have under NATO. And then he goes further, calling out Stephen Miller. He says either Stephen Miller needs to get into a lane where he knows what he's talking about or get out of his job. Tillis says Denmark punched above its weight in Afghanistan, lost 43 soldiers, fought in contested regions, honoring their Article 5 commitment. He emphasizes per capita losses, how Denmark sacrifices more per person than bigger nations, and he repeats a line generals have said forever. The only thing worse than going to war with allies is going to war without allies. He also says something else that matters. He says Stephen Miller doesn't represent the U.S. government. He represents the Article 2 branch, and as a member of the U.S. Senate, he gets to weigh in. And he adds the part you rarely hear out loud. Most of his colleagues agree with him, whether they say it publicly or not. That is what fear looks like inside a party. Agreement whispered, not spoken. Then you have Republican Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska, also not running for re-election, calling Trump's Greenland threat appalling. He says Republicans should stand up against this and universally oppose it. He calls it demeaning, with no upside. He says Denmark is one of our best friends. He says Denmark had more people per capita die in Afghanistan and Iraq fighting for us. He says Greenland is a NATO ally. We already have a base there. We could put more bases there. We could make agreements on mining. We could build cooperation. But threatening military action is unacceptable, and he hopes other Republicans line up behind him and tell the White House it's wrong. Now the story shifts to the streets, to Minneapolis, to protests, to the way Trump's America keeps flirting with authoritarian tactics and then acting offended when people notice. Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, independent, Vietnam veteran, Navy SEAL, visits a high school that engaged in peaceful protests against ICE in the Minneapolis region. He shows support for the students and speaks with a moral clarity that cuts through the fog. He says this is a place of learning, where kids learn the Constitution, warrants, rights. He says what's happening now violates all of that. He says we're a third world country now. He says he knows because he's been to them. He spent 17 months in Southeast Asia while the draft dodger was playing golf. He says in third world countries, the military does police work in the cities. He describes being in the Philippines the day Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and went under dictatorship. How you go from normal to machine guns on every corner. That's what dictatorship looks like. The military comes in. He tells people to wake up. He tells them to read history, to compare tactics to 1930s Germany, because this is not new. It's a repeat, a pattern, a game plan. Ventura says turning the military loose undermines the entire Constitution. He says the military cannot be turned loose unless it's a national emergency, and he questions whether they're going to claim it is. Then someone asks for a message for Trump or Governor Walz. Ventura says who, the draft-dodging coward. He refuses to call him by name. He says rich white boys never had to go. He says he wasn't a rich white boy. He grew up in South Minneapolis. He and his friends were Vietnam veterans. They had to go, but the rich boys didn't. And now Trump wants to lecture people about courage. Then Ventura goes even bolder. He says we are a country of the Constitution, and we have leadership now that has destroyed the Constitution, that doesn't follow it, that doesn't care. He reminds everyone he took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And he says after January 6, he views the Republican Party as a domestic enemy to the Constitution. That's not subtle. That's a siren. And while Ventura is delivering that warning, you have state regime media trying to provoke the population in Minnesota and Minneapolis. Laura Ingraham is on camera asking people why they're wearing a mask. Someone answers, "Because my nose is cold. Why do you care if I'm wearing a mask?" She says she's just curious. It's a question, and you can hear the emptiness of it. A manufactured confrontation, a tiny attempt to turn discomfort into suspicion, to make normal people look like threats, to keep the audience scared and obedient. And that is the same playbook Trump uses everywhere. In Congress, he demands loyalty and calls defiance betrayal. Abroad, he threatens allies and calls restraint weakness. At home, he escalates force and calls protest chaos. Then he stares into the camera and pretends he's the victim. So yes, Trump is losing it as the GOP revolts in Congress, because control is the only thing he understands. He doesn't lead. He dominates. He doesn't persuade. He punishes. And when that stops working, when Republicans vote with Democrats on health care, when senators move a plaque honoring January 6th officers, when senators restrict his war powers, when lawmakers reassure Denmark and Greenland behind his back, his system short-circuits. This isn't Trump playing four-dimensional chess. This is Trump being exposed as what he has always been, a loud, fragile man who mistakes volume for strength and revenge for leadership. He doesn't want policy. He wants submission. He doesn't want truth. He wants silence. And he especially doesn't want history written in metal on a wall that people can read forever. We are anonymous. We don't need you to worship politicians. We need you to watch them. Track the votes. Track the veto threats. Track who honors January 6th law enforcement and who blocks it. Track who protects healthcare and who uses your family's survival as leverage. If you want more stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe, share, stay loud. Because when power starts slipping, the truth comes out fast.